Welcome to I Accidentally Married a Filipina. My name is Rob, but this is not my story. This is John's story, and I will warn you ahead of time. Buckle up. Here's John's story. Let me start by saying that I am just a normal, everyday guy. I've always been this way, and my best characteristic is my biggest flaw. I'm a nice guy. People always say nice guys finish last, but I think I would rather be nice in last place than mean and ugly in first place. And therein lies my problem. The best place to start my story is high school. I was an athlete playing football and wrestling, and I really enjoyed that. That is, until both of my parents were diagnosed with cancer within 6 months of each other. The types of illness they had were not necessarily death sentences, but recovery would be a long and expensive road. The expensive part really put the stops to my athletics, and if I was to have any money for anything for myself, I would have to go and get a job, and get a job I did. I started unloading trucks and stocking shelves in the local chain supermarket after school and into the evening. It was a pretty good job for a high school kid, and there was also a good-looking girl my age that worked in the bakery. I really didn't have a chance with her because she was extraordinary where I was just ordinary. I had many chances to say hello to Janet, as if a heavy sack of flour needed lifted or dumped into the giant mixer, they would call me and I would use my football muscles to help. I usually would wait until Janet was looking, and I would quickly and robustly snatch up that bag like it was filled with air and hold it effortlessly as the flour rushed out of the bag. Janet never looked too overly impressed, but she always did say, "Thank you, John," in her cute southern accent, so I was never bothered by being called into the bakery. One particular Saturday, I was called to the bakery by Janet, and she asked for my help. I hoisted the flour bag up as it was emptying. I clutched at my back and let out a low growl as if I pulled a muscle. I let the empty bag fall to the floor and turned, and as I held my back, I started to hobble back to the stockroom and sat on a stack of baked bean cases. Just as I sit down, in comes Janet with a look of concern on her face and a nicely decorated cupcake in her hand. She asks if I'm okay, and I wince in pain as I reach out to accept her sweet treat and say, "I'm okay." She said she is so sorry she made me lift that heavy bag, and could she do anything for me? I saw my opening, and I summoned up all my courage and said the only thing that would make my back feel better is if she would go on a date with me to TGI Fridays tomorrow evening. She felt bad and agreed. My plan had worked. I know I said I was a nice guy, and I am, but nice guys finish last, don't you know? Janet and I dated all our senior year and became very close. I spent every Sunday at her house watching football with her dad, who was a retired Navy veteran. As senior year came to end, eventually Janet and I began talking about a future together and getting married. I was ecstatic. She was easily one of the hottest girls in high school, and I did not want to give her any reason to doubt I could provide for her. The economy was tough, and I wasn't finding anything that would pay better than my grocery job, and I knew a stock boy was not going to cut it for a beauty like Janet. My 18th birthday came and went as we graduated, and I made the brash decision to go downtown to the Navy recruiter, and I signed up and would be leaving later that summer. The pay would be good enough to support my future wife, and we would have health benefits for us and our future children, and she loved her Navy veteran dad, so I couldn't wait to tell her family on Sunday the good news. We had a great family dinner, and in my haste, I blurted out, "I went to the recruiter and joined the Navy." Janet's dad stood up and proudly shook my hand and welcomed me aboard, whereas Janet stood up and ran crying to her room. I followed her and asked her why the tears. "I thought you would be thrilled. I'm following in your father's footsteps, and I will be financially stable for our future." She took my hands and said she saw how difficult it was for her mom to always be away from her dad and how much it pained her, and frankly, she loves me too much to live that life. I told her I'd signed a binding contract with our government, and that was the end of it, and she said, and that will be the end of us. I shipped out heartbroken and did my tour on the coast of France, Turkey, Greece, Spain, Italy, and Egypt. I did not find love overseas, but I did sample enough of the fare to keep my mind mostly off of Janet. After my commitment to Uncle Sam was over, I returned to my hometown and tried to look up Janet. There were no traces of her to be found anywhere. It was as if she had disappeared. Enough time had passed, and I gave up on a life with Janet and enrolled in college on the GI Bill and shared an apartment with my younger sister. I continued half-heartedly with my schoolwork and wholeheartedly with tequila. My sister was getting real tired of me laying around and drinking most days and let me have it. She said she knew I was still heartbroken over Janet, but I needed to get over her and get my life back on track. She said she had a really sweet and nice friend she wanted to introduce to me, but not until I started acting right. "It's not Amanda, is it?" I asked. She said it was. I said, "Well, in that case, I will go shower right now and clean my act up." Amanda was a really sweet blonde-haired friend of my sister's that I think is very pretty, so why not use that motivation to get back on track? After I proved myself for a couple of weeks, my sister called me and told me to clean up the apartment and clean up myself, as she's bringing some friends home after work, and one of them is Amanda. I snapped to and policed myself and my quarters in anticipation of a possible new love interest. Amanda and I immediately connected, and we were inseparable from that point on. After a 5-month whirlwind, we were married and had our first daughter shortly thereafter. 3 years later, daughter number 2 arrives, and we were the happiest little family ever. My marriage with Amanda was very fulfilling for the first 15 years, and raising our daughters was the joy of my life. There wasn't anything I wouldn't do for my girls, and they both required private school, braces, traveling sports, etc., etc. So in addition to my full-time job as a local truck route driver, I went and delivered pizzas for an additional 6 hours a day, or 6 days a week, because Amanda quit her job to go to nursing school. Working that much was exhausting, and after 5 years of not seeing my daughters as much as I would have liked, I quit the pizza job. Amanda graduated from nursing school, and at her graduation party at the local steakhouse, as I was standing in the background, I hear her father questioning her about her future plans with her nursing degree. She said she was going to get a place for her and her daughters because she just got a great job at the hospital. Puzzled, her father asked, "You and the girls? Aren't you forgetting your husband?" To which she replied, "I got a great job that pays plenty of money. I don't need a man anymore." That was a terrible gut punch. But it was a long time coming. We hadn't really lived as husband and wife for the past 4 years. We had grown apart. I had grown towards our children, and she had grown towards independence. I was truly sad and depressed, but knew it was for the best, so I moved out and tried to reconnect with some buddies and spend time with my now teenage daughters. One of my old friends was over to the house drinking beer one afternoon and says, "Hey, John, didn't you date Janet in high school?" I said I did. He said she had just gotten divorced and moved back home. Did I want her number? Heck yeah, I said. We quickly started texting back and forth, and she invited me over for old time's sake. We picked up right where we left off, it seemed, and in typical John fashion, we were married 4 months later. I immediately started seeing red flags waving all over the place. It seemed that for the whole of the time she was married, she was emotionally tortured, and it had made her a different person from the person I remember. Sure, she could fake it for a day or two, but then change would take place, and it was like living with a criminally insane inmate at the penitentiary. But I'm Big Bad John. I will ride my trusty steed into her life and save her. If I just love her enough and support her enough, she will forget the evil in her past, and she will love me all the more. This white knight was riding high until the man who lived next door told me something that probably saved my life. My neighbor at the time was a pretty cool guy, but he would never tell me who he worked for or what he did for a living. I always just assumed he was in some sort of secret law enforcement. Janet's cousin had been staying over at our house more and more I was ignored by both of them. I was having trouble sleeping, I was having trouble keeping food down, and I was losing what was left of my hair. When I say I'm a nice guy, this is what I mean. I will do anything to make it work, but I'm starting to think that nice guy equals sucker. And I take full responsibility for that. The first thing I did was every day when I left for work. Now remember, I'm a truck route driver, so I'm on the road by 4:30 a.m. every morning. So I would take a clothes hamper full of my belongings to a storage facility until I was down to bare essentials, and Janet and her cousin ignored me so much they never noticed. One morning on my pre-dawn stealth mission, my neighbor is standing on his porch and motions me over and begins to interrogate me. Was I moving out? Was I feeling in danger? I told him I was moving my things out and I did have a bad feeling, but I wasn't leaving. He said he had been watching me leave and come home every day for 2 months because he had the same feeling. He pulled out a sheet of paper that had text messages on it. It was from Janet to her cousin, and to make a long story short, I'm worth more in life insurance to Janet than I was if they'd let me stick around. Not to be too dramatic, but he said if I didn't leave right then and never contact Janet again, he would shoot me himself. This was like I was a part of a CIA movie, but I took him seriously and never contacted Janet or my neighbor again, except for our lawyers to work through the divorce that was actually very simple, all things considered. I called my high school buddy who lived in Tulsa and had a house, and he said he would rent me a room. For a couple of months, all I did was work. I would only go out to visit my kids, and I kept a low profile out of constantly looking over my shoulder. Eventually, I got over that and decided to get on a local dating site because, as you may have figured out, I'm not good at being alone. I was on a roll. I had 27 first dates with no second date. Again, I know I'm not a movie star, just a normal guy, but 27 in a row? Not all 27 were their choice. Some were my choice not to move forward with a second date. I put up honest, unfiltered photos of myself and was honest about what I was looking for in a relationship. Mostly my first dates would show up looking 15 years older than their reported age, or many times they just wanted to go to a nice place to eat on my dime. One gal I took to the Outback Steakhouse showed up looking reasonably close to her photos, hugged me at the door. She dressed well, she smelled good, and she was easy to talk to as we had a drink at the bar as we waited for our table. All was going great. I'm thinking I will have my first second date from this prospect. The waiter came up and she ordered the biggest, most expensive steak on the menu, 2 starter hors d'oeuvres, and a big dessert. Before I even order, she instructs the waiter to box up half the steak, half the baked potato, the 2 starters, and to bring her the other half of the steak and potato when he brought my meal. I was flabbergasted. I looked up at the waiter, stood up, and politely excused myself to the car. And that is why my streak ended at 27 first days. Back to work and back to not dating for a month or so until, that is, a friend from my truck route said I should go on a date with his cousin. My friend was black and we were pretty close, so I admitted this was a little intimidating as I had never considered dating outside of my race. How would I act? I asked. He said, start by not being an idiot. Do you treat me differently? I pondered that question for a moment and said, well, I guess I don't. He said, then do the same for my cousin. A couple of text messages later, I am out on a date with LaRonda. I was nervous as heck. She was a nice-looking woman, and she dressed smartly. She had a great job and told me she doesn't date white guys, but her cousin talked her into it. This made both of us laugh and led to a really good friendship. We were not a love connection, but it opened my eyes to a before recently untapped potential dating pool. So I rushed in headfirst with this promise. I would no longer date a white woman. I had to try something drastic to find better results, and this was it. I changed my preferences in real life and on the dating site and met a woman named Trina for a first and second date. My confidence was soaring sky high. Trina was my height when she wore heels, and she always wore heels except when she was at her job as a travel nurse. Trina lived in Lubbock, Texas, but commuted every week to Dallas where the travel job was, and then would return to Lubbock every weekend. For this travel job, she was paid $350,000 annually. I had just turned 51, and Trina had just turned 34, so there was a bit of an age gap, but we got along great. Because of my schedule, I could make the 10-hour round trip to Dallas Wednesday and Friday, but the Friday trip included the weekend in Lubbock. I never missed a trip, and Trina and I were dating for about 6 months when I figured out the first red flag. I was always driving her to Dallas or Lubbock for what I thought was convenience, but what turned out to be multiple DUIs. She only would have a couple of glasses on wine on Wednesdays, but the weekends she would get carried away. But hey, isn't that what weekends are for? Plus, to be honest, drinking made her wild in the sack, and I was 100% in for that. Looking back, I am sure the elevated drinking libido blinded me to many things, such as getting once-a-month calls about her being pregnant, and she needed me right there, right now, so no matter the time of day. Here comes the white knight, 5 hours away to rescue his damsel in distress, only to find out she was lying because she was drunk and lonely. Or the time she called me from Dallas lockup to come and bail her out on a weeknight because she got picked up for public intoxication. After this one, Trina promised to slow down her drinking because she couldn't lose her job. What about losing me, I selfishly thought. One of the stops at my daily route had a manager who I saw every day and became friendly with. The manager was a Filipina married to an American and had worked her way up to manager. We bonded over me telling the latest crashed and burned story with Trina. Every time I would tell her about my weekend, she would say, "You should date my sister in the Philippines. She is not brown like me. She is color white, so attractive." I would always say that I'm boycotting white women, and she would always say, "How is that working out?" I would laugh and go on to my next step. It is state law that with my level of driving license, I cannot talk on the phone while I am at work, especially when I am at work. When I punch out, I have many, many messages from Trina. She is getting evicted from her house in Lubbock and needs to move on to Dallas over the next 2 days, and could I help her? So on my way there, I arranged for a moving company to meet me there and pay with a credit card to expedite the service. I help her pack as the movers load the heavy stuff and make the first of the 2 trips to Dallas. I help when we arrive in Dallas, and the next trip would be tomorrow morning to load in Lubbock and unload in Dallas, and I would meet her there after I got off work. I made it back to Tulsa just in time to sleep a couple of hours before work. I start my normal routine and I'm heading to work, and I get a sinking feeling that I'm letting Trina down. I know she is a drunk, and I know she is terrible at handling money. I know she's terrible at showing up to work on time, but there was just something about her when she takes that drink that lets it all hang out. I suppose I'm mistaking lust for love, but I put on my white hat and skipped work and headed to Dallas. I'm getting used to the 5-hour trip to Dallas. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes I just think dating should be easier. As I pull up to Trina's house, I see the moving truck backed in, the overhead door is open, but I guess they haven't started yet because there was not any boxes or furniture loaded. Great, I think. I'm just in time to oversee this operation and get everybody moving in the right direction. I walk through the open door quietly as I want to surprise Trina, and surprise her I did. She was totally shocked, as were the 2 buck-naked movers that were quickly wrestling to untangle themselves from Trina. Everybody started apologizing, and I just throw my hands up in the air and jump in my car. As I'm tearing out of the driveway, all I can see is Trina in her birthday suit running down the driveway. On my drive home from the ultimate betrayal, I decide to be super self-reflective because I'm getting tired of being taken advantage of. I'm not tired of being a nice guy because that's just my nature, but accepting being the only honest person in a 2-person relationship is over for me. I admit my shortcomings and vow to stop making these decisions as if I'm wearing rose-colored glasses every day. I wake up for work the next day and continue my route, and I stop long enough to fill in the Filipino manager, Jane, and she was frankly embarrassed for me. She said, "John, you've got to stop dating girls who always want to take your pride, but they never build you up. You must be emotionally exhausted." After a moment of reflection, I agreed with her and told her I was done judging women on their looks and overlooking their social and emotional flaws, and especially overlooking their poor treatment of me. Then she says, "You should date my sister. She is kind and never married." I stopped her right there and said, "I better take a break." And off I went to finish my route. I was going on 2 months of no dating and not even trying, and 2 months was a new record for me. It was getting towards fall of 2024, and I'll admit I was getting a little antsy, and the next time Filipina Jane mentioned her sister in the Philippines, I took the bait and told her I might be interested. Jane gave me her sister's Facebook information, and when I got home, I stalked Karen in the Philippines on Facebook. And she was very pretty, very conservative, had a young daughter, but Karen was definitely too young for me. That next week, I saw Filipina Jane, and she asked why I had only friend requested her sister, but did not message her. I said she marks all of the boxes, but she's definitely too young for me. Jane asked how old I was. I answered 54. She asked how old I thought Karen was. I said, "Well, I don't know, 26? Jane laughed and said, "Karen is 42. Go to your home and message her." 42? Seriously, she looked 26. 42 is a reasonable age gap for me, and it doesn't bother me that she has a daughter. I messaged Karen, and she never messaged me back, so the next day I told Jane I gave it a try, but her sister is not interested as she never messaged me back. Jane said she would look into it. By the time I got home, Karen had messaged me and apologized because she thought I was a typical American scammer and did not message me back. We had a nice back and forth messaging, and I told her I would video call her tomorrow when I woke up and got back from the gym. I fired up the video call, and Karen answered. She was just as petite and even better looking on video. I said, "Hi, how are you?" She paused, looked confused, and said, "You are fat." I said, "Have a nice day," and I ended the call. At work, I told the story to Filipina Jane and told her no more setting me up with any of her relatives. I know I am overweight. I used to be really overweight, but I have made a lot of progress through diet and exercise and am not far from some of my goals. So that ended that.
My name Karen. I live in San Rafael near 8 Waves Water Park. I have one daughter grade 5 in school, and I graduate high school and work as seamstress right next to my house. Garment shop has 15 sewing machine and make everything from pillowcase to dress. We can sew whatever big vendor need. I work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and care for my daughter. My daughter father left very early in her life. We never marry. I always dream of moving to United States and find good life with good husband just like my sister do. My sister recommend a foreign to me on Facebook, but I never look his profile because Facebook full of scammers only want to look at dirty picture and talk bad language. I do not respond. My sister call me and tell me don't be stupid, John is friend, John have good job and is good man. I hurry and message to John, and when he video chat me I freeze and say you are fat. It was first thing into my head. I am shy and it makes my English not work. My sister call me next day and ask why so dumb. I tell her I think John nice looking and I know he go to gym, but my English went carabao and I am too shy to call him back. She talked to John and I try and call John back.
After such a bad first video call from Karen, I was reluctant to take her call when she called me back. She said, "Hi, John. I am sorry. My English is not good sometimes, and we Filipinas just say what comes out of our mind right away. My sister tells me you are a good man and try to lose weight at the gym, so I am sorry." I'm still a little mad, but I really think she seems sincere and sweet, so I tell her about being bullied about my weight most of my life, but I've cleaned up my dieting and work out regularly. She said it was no problem for her, and she thinks I'm guapo. That helped her cause, so we continued on talking generally when I was at the gym early morning. She would be patient as I would do my set and then talk to her in between. This really makes the workouts go by much quicker because of her 12-hour work days and my early to bed, early to rise schedule. We struggle to find much more time in common, but we're making it work. We have been talking for a few months, and Karen has never asked me for money. I will admit that I have committed the mortal sin of sending her $20 3 times for a load for her phone. I can afford it, and it makes me happy to talk to her. She really is the best part of my day that I look forward to the most. We have started to broach the subject of me visiting her in San Rafael over spring break in March of 2025. And if all goes well, a K-1 visa, as she is willing to relocate with her daughter to America. I know what you're saying, but John, isn't this your M.O.? You move too fast, you try too hard. Well, yes and yes. The big difference is there is no touching involved. Nothing physical can cloud my judgment. And if I can last 5 or 6 months only talking over the phone and not being intimate, I feel like that would be a big win for us both. But I will have to leave it here for now, as I have just bought my ticket, and I will update you when I get back from the Philippines.